Hi, I'm Da and welcome to today's video. In this video, I'm going to describe my favorite Photoshop tools that I use in my painting. I'm selecting only the ones that I find most useful, and I will tell you about additional advanced features that not every beginner knows about and that I personally would appreciate as a beginner. I will ask you to like it so that my video can reach more people. Thanks a lot. I will go through the tools from top to bottom. Not in order of my preference, but so that it's easy for you to navigate. Normally, I use Photoshop Customized Toolbar, where I have the tools set up in a way that suits me personally. You can set it up in the Editor toolbar, here. However, for this video I put the tools in their original settings, as you probably have them as well. The first tool I would like to introduce here is the so-called Lasso tool. It's one of my favorite shading tools. Let's use it as an example. I have the studio open here. Let's say I want to draw a shadow here from the side on the nose, but I don't want to use it to affect the cheeks. So I'm going to select the nose area with the lasso tool, and now I can shade it however I want. I'm intentionally using a different color so that you can see exactly where I'm painting the shadow. And as you can see, this is where the gradient is completely lost, so you can see it. And because I actually had the shape picked out, the edge here is beautifully sharp. However, you don't always want the edge sharp, so that's why there is a cool feature or extension to this tool, and that's feather blur. So, for example, if we set up the value to 10, the edge of this lasso won't be as sharp, and therefore you won't create as much contrast in the spot, and the shadows will be much softer, like this. Of course, you can take this to extremes and set it to 100, for example. This will then create a smooth shadow according to the given shape. Another tool I use is Eyedrop tool. Apart from its primary function where you can select a specific pixel color value in the image, the eyedropper is great for blending two colors, so that it makes beautiful shading. Let's demonstrate it again with an example on her forehead. I have this shade on the top and this shade on the bottom, and I want to blend them together. So using an eyedropper, I can create a nice smooth transition by choosing the top color first and shading into the bottom color with light coverage. Same thing, I choose the eyedropper for the bottom color and shade to the top color. Then I use the eyedropper to select these colors and shade and actually create a seamless transition from these two colors. One of the advantages is that you can use a sample size for the eyedropper, which we will show in the Vesna image. The sample size means how much area is included in your chosen color. In the first loss value, you are selecting the value of particular pixel, for example, here, yellow or pink. However, when you select large sample, the dropper is already making these colors average out to some diameter in a certain neighborhood. When I choose the yellow flower here again, I no longer have a pure yellow, but a sort of greenish yellow, because this value is calculated from multiple colors in the neighborhood. Another tool is the brush tool. It's probably the most basic painting tool if you want to paint in Photoshop. You could say that you don't need anything other than a brush and eraser. So I'm not going to describe any of its settings that you can see on the screen right now, because that would be a long and maybe another video. But even with an ordinary brush, there are improvements that people don't know about and don't use. For example, the fact that the brush has what's called modes, where you can draw with multiply, for example, which allows you to shade. For example, here on her face. If I didn't have the mode in there, it would just be the basic paint in original shade. The moment that the mode is on, it's already reacting with the layer. My favorite mode is also linear dodge, which I can use to lighten the painting, create lights. But here you have to be careful not to overdo it. However, if I take her like here, for example, I can add light here. The last one here of the modes that I use is color, where I can recolor one particular area that I don't like. For example, if I want this dough to be purple, I will set that mode and choose the color purple and just repaint it, like this. Another cool thing that the brush can do is symmetry tool option, and the best way to see that is probably here on Pandora. It can be used anywhere. You have a symmetrical part here, for example on her face. If you turn on the brush and go to symmetry here and choose a vertical line, for example here, I'm going to choose a bold color on purpose so you can see it. Now, when I'm drawing the eyelashes on the one eye, I'm also drawing on the other eye at the same time. This saves a lot of time. You can avoid some copying and flipping and so on. I will not describe the eraser tool, which is also important in drawing because its principle is probably understood by everyone, I hope. However, it's nice to mention that it also works on the symmetry tool, which I find cool, and you can set it up just like the brush. One of the hidden things with the brush is a brush called Mix It Brush tool. With it, you can actually blur the painting at the same time. It's kind of a combination between the smudge tool and the brush because it works on the principle that it reacts to the color of the surface and also the color that you have selected. It gives the painting a very traditional look, and you can achieve the effect of, say, an oil painting or an acrylic, especially if you use the texture of some paper for the background, which I will deal in a moment. Another favorite tool of mine is the stamp, where you can clone any part of your image using Alt. For example, here with the Vesna painting, it was very useful because I didn't have to spend 6 months rendering all the grass in the painting and got the same level of detail everywhere. So the stamp saves a lot of time. Of course, you have to be careful where you are cloning and you have to play around with it a bit, uh, but it goes really fast. Okay, and if you get a glitch somewhere, I still use this patch tool here, where you can mark the part you want to remove and move to the part you want to replace. So you just draw a really tiny bit of the image and then you just clone. Of course, some possible further editing is necessary so that it doesn't look like, for example, now I've created 4 identical yellow flowers here, which at a glance you can see are cloned. I will circle them here. You can see that they are the same, so then it takes some adjustment, but I think you are going to put a lot of time down on that painting. Another tool that I use mainly from the beginning of the painting is either the gradient tool here or the paint bucket tool. That made it really quick to actually create a uniform surface. You don't have to render it uniformly with a brush, but with one click, there you select a solid color. Or you can then use the gradient to select. I'm going to choose a bold transition there so that you can see it. You can use the gradient to very quickly create a background to your liking. Plus, the cool thing about the paint bucket tool here is that you just don't have to fill in the color, but you can fill in the texture, which you can do here. So if you have some, for example, watercolor paper presets in there, you can very quickly add some texture, and then if you use the multiply mode of that brush that I mentioned earlier, it gives the impression of a traditional painting. Another tool hiding under the drop here is the smudge tool. With it, you can smudge your brush strokes. For example, it's great for the flames of fire And here we can show that on this monster up here. I can adjust the shape of the smooth quite easily to get it more spread out here. Very efficient, fast and comfortable. It's also useful for shading. For example, if I want to slightly blur the sharp edge between the dress and the skin here, I will take the preset tool I have here, and it actually blurs it very easily with one click, which is great. You can shade beautifully with it or blend some specific color with it. And the last tool, which is one of the very handy ones, is the rotation of the window. It's usually hidden under this handle here. With the rotation here, you can rotate the whole canvas to the angle you need, which is handy if you are drawing a portrait, for example, and you need to tilt it at an angle. Because if the portrait that you are drawing right now is not exactly parallel to the format, but it's slightly tilted, then the draftsman, especially the beginner, is very much affected by this edge and tempted to just draw crookedly. And this tilt tool just makes it more comfortable. To demonstrate this with a concrete example. If I had the lady here, for example, like this, and I was drawing straight, it would be terribly difficult to draw it. I would definitely miss the eyes on this painting because I would try to do them straight and I would draw them like this. Well, the moment I tilt it and put it perpendicular to the axis here, I find that the eye was drifting down here and I could fix it. You can still use this feature when you are drawing, say, a study, using a two-window layout. So if you have rotate all windows checked, then all of your windows will be rotated. So if you are doing a study based on a photo, for example, the photo will rotate at the same time as your painting. And that's for me. Thank you very much for watching the video to the end. If you like this video, I will ask you to like, comment or subscribe again so you don't miss any future videos. And if you want to know more secret tips that will make you a Photoshop pro, or if you like to learn how to draw digitally, join my Patreon and www.patreon.com/DanielArt. I will look forward to seeing you. Or maybe you are intrigued by my paintings and would you just like to support me by buying the painting? Then go to my shop at www.daniel.art/shop. See you then!